Exchange on Deep Dive.
Many thanks for staying with us. Time now is 20 minutes past 7 and we get into the exchange. This evening, my guest is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, Ms. Vimbai Nyemba. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
It's very good to have you in the studio. We want to unpack the death penalty. Now, before we started the conversation, a lot of the listeners were wondering, why are we talking about this? And I think it's important to give it context because there is, of course, a bill that is discussing this particular aspect, and the views of the public are going to be needed in coming up with a final position in terms of this bill. But start us off, Ms. Nyemba, in terms of what is the death penalty?
The death penalty is a sentence imposed by a competent court on an individual who has committed a crime. And in our country, usually it's murder with aggravating circumstances.
Okay. And in terms of the current position, before we get into the bill, what is the position of the law regards the death penalty currently?
Currently, we've got our constitution, and our constitution speaks of the right to life. Our criminal law has the death sentence still, and in our other enactments, as a manner of punishment. However, the codification, the criminal codification and the constitution have not given it that everyone who is killed in aggravating circumstances must be executed. It actually discriminates. There are other people who are not supposed to be part of that. Like if you committed an offense when you were not 21 years of age, when you were below the age of 21, when you committed the offense when you are an elderly, an old man who is above the age of 70, and when you are a woman.
Well, we'll come to those aspects of, why these particular groups are exempt. You did say it is the constitution, but those aspects are coming up. You talked about aggravating circumstances.
Yes.
What amounts to aggravating circumstances, and why is the law so involved in executing or in meeting out a certain level of punishment when aggravating circumstances are involved?
Murders are committed differently, but there are other instances where you look at how it has been committed and you are surprised why it was done. So our law also gives us a summary of what could be aggravating circumstances, like you commit an offense, rape. After raping, you kill somebody. You break into their house with the intention of stealing. You kill them. You rob them. You hijack them. You do one and then end up killing somebody. That's very aggravating. So aggravating circumstances are those circumstances that will make the murder so out of this world, so magnified. Even someone, when you are listening to the content of a murder case, before anyone tells you that they are aggravating circumstances, you can feel that this was totally wrong.
I of course, as you're saying that, what comes to mind, and I do know that it's a case that I can make example of. I mean, it's the Makore case where many people were left dumbfounded to say, so in those particular circumstances, the law will see it fit to sentence someone to death.
Currently, as it stands, under those circumstances, like the Makore case that you have already cited, the law will see it fit as we speak now, and a death sentence has to be imposed under those circumstances. And sometimes there are some who commit murder for, I think, for rituals. Before they kill you, they'll take parts from you. Those will be aggravating circumstances.
You talked about exemptions, Ms. Nyemba. Let's get into some of those exemptions in terms of currently who is exempted from being sentenced to death. You talked about young persons when the crime is committed, elderly persons, and women. Talk us through these.
Yeah, I think this is coming from the fact that death sentence in itself is also quite inhuman. It's against human rights. So the imposition of the death penalty in our case, in our country, was something that would then be done when there is no other way out. But they said, look, if someone is below the age of 21, let them be exempted. They are young. Maybe that's a circumstances that is mitigatory. That's a circumstance that's mitigatory. They were young. They had not appreciated what they were going to do, what they had done. When they are old, you are like, look, 70 years is a lifespan. So anything above that, surely let them live. For a woman, I think it has been found that a lot of women commit these murders in emotional circumstances. So I think it's just coming from that end, that we are not really a death penalty jurisdiction per se. If anything, I think we've tried to avoid it.
And speaking of this avoidance, I do understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it has been, I think, the last people to have actually ever been executed or subjected to the death penalty in Zimbabwe, Chiduma and Masendeke, if I'm not mistaken. So everyone else has sort of been waiting, and I also hear that there's no hangman. Is this true that all these people have been waiting on death row, or effectively now they're on death row because we don't have someone at the other end to actually execute and commit and fulfill the job, in that the hangman post is the longest standing vacancy?
Yeah, people have been speaking about the hangman. In Zimbabwe, our last, I think, executions were in 2005, like you are rightly saying. And since then, we have had death sentences being passed, and we've got inmates in custody, still awaiting, in quotation marks. And the hangmen, we don't have problems with the hangmen. When social media started talking about the issue of the hangmen, when the issue of this bill was being talked about, I think we had quite a number of applications coming. I actually remember they could be 5. They are actually waiting for the job. So it's not really about the hangman. I think it's the whole thing about the principle of, do we really want the death penalty or we don't want it? Yeah. So the hangmen are there. They are ready.
Willing.
Very much willing.
Okay.
And the money is there to pay them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least you've cleared that up, because a lot of people have been saying, it's because no one wants the job. And somebody even said to me before, please ask the PS if women can also be considered for this position.
Yeah, if they apply, why not?
If they apply, why not? Yeah. All right, okay, well, there you have it. That question has been resolved right here in the studio. We are talking, of course, to Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, unpacking the issue of the death penalty. Currently, it does stand in our country, but there is a bill that is before Parliament. What is our position as a country now, looking at what has brought about this bill? Do we want to abolish it? Why do we want to abolish it, and why have we come to this position? What is contained in the bill?
Like we are rightly saying, the bill is all about abolishing the death penalty. Why? Because I think we don't want it. But we are also divided. There could be a few who still insist that it should happen. But when we were looking at when you look at other jurisdictions, like Malawi no longer has the death penalty. When we look at Mozambique abolished it in 1990. Malawi 2021. South Africa, 1995, it was abolished. In Kenya, to 2017, Zambia, 2022. So in terms of human rights standards, we are also almost like lagging behind. It has been found to be inhuman, like I have said, and also sometimes we make mistakes by hanging an innocent person, and once we have executed and this person is innocent, you can't reverse. We also have this conscience that you don't correct a wrong by another wrong. If you kill them, what will you have done? They should be corrected, they should be rehabilitated. Our prisons now, they rehabilitate offenders, and it is from that notion that we feel that even the murderers can be rehabilitated in the process. There was also the thinking that if you kill, if you have the death sentence, it is deterrent. But we have had the death sentence. It has never been deterrent. In South Africa, they've had it, and they discovered it was not any deterrent at all. So there was no need really to continue with it. And it's also barbaric, you know, just to kill somebody. And you remember our constitution speak to the right to life. You know, everybody has a right to life. It doesn't matter what they have done, they have a right to live. So I think for those reasons, I think capital punishment is not favorable to quite a number of people. But let me say there are some who still think it's the way to go. You know, especially those who have been victims in their families. And when they speak, they really cry. They say, you know, why? But that's just emotional. Even if you then kill the person who has killed, you are not going to get your person who has been killed. So I think as a Christian country as well, we come from a background of forgiveness, where we even say, God can forgive.
So why not
why can't we? If we can be forgiven, why can't we?
You mentioned that there's, you know, a school of thought, or those who say there's a special place for certain types of offenders. Those who rape children, those who murder in those aggravating circumstances. What happens to them? Those gruesome, who've been convicted of all these gruesome and heinous crimes that make you just say, hey, if I could do it myself, I would. What happens to that particular group of people?
Once the bill becomes law, then there will not be any death sentence passed on anybody. Because even in the bill, it says no court shall pass a sentence of death on anyone for any crime.
And what will be passed in its stead then?
Of course, in its stead, there will be life imprisonment or some other suitable sentence that can be passed by a high court.
And life imprisonment is adequate, you think?
Yeah. You are excluded from your family. You are excluded from your surroundings. You are excluded from your environment. You begin to live a different life. Remember, prison is prison. It's not home.
That's true.
Even if you were to be confined in the four corners of a room like this one for life, honestly, that is not life. Yeah. So that I'm sure that will be quite adequate
and deterrent.
Yeah. And each time you visit them and you talk to them, you feel that they've repented. You feel that they are even better than some people who are walking outside. So with time, as they stay longer in prison, as they think that this is their whole life, they change. They change. They are rehabilitable.
Okay, rehabilitable. The permanent secretary says so. If the bill passes, it will effectively abolish the death penalty, and the alternative punishment there will then be life imprisonment. You spoke about the human rights aspects, and it is torture in itself. And this is something that I've also heard being said, that, you know, waiting for something that will never come. So for all those men who are waiting, the middle-aged men in that gap waiting to be executed, and it never happened, you know, how are they going to be rehabilitated? Is there any recourse for them? You know, looking at the direction in which the law is going.
I've seen quite a number. I've spoken to them in the prison cells. They are quite hopeful. They are doing a few projects in prison. They are hopeful that one day they will come out. And what makes them hopeful is that we have not had executions since 2005. And even as we speak about this bill, that is, you know, they become even more hopeful. So instead of them being miserable, feeling unwanted, they actually have got some joy. They see, they've got hope. They see hope at the end of the tunnel. They see some light at the end of the tunnel. They are quite hopeful. So while I admit that as soon as you are sentenced to death, you have not been exposed to the others who are also facing the same sentence, you have not discussed with anybody, it's almost like your life is gone. So to me, those who are in there who have been waiting, they've been punished enough. They've gone through enough torture in their lives. It's not easy to wake up not knowing when the hangman will be there. Remember, they also don't have newspapers, and they may not even know about the hangman who has not been given a contract. And you know, each morning they think, I'll have
Today's the day.
Knock, yes, on my door to say you can come. But they give themselves something to do. Yeah, like I told you, jere harisisiri jere rekudhara. Say jere is now rehabilitating people, is teaching them, it's reforming them. Most of them are our fundis.
And I even you know, many choirs as well, but quite a lot of rehabilitation going on there.
Yes.
I want us to direct our attention, and it's always so delicate when we deal with these issues, because as you rightfully say, we're looking at people who've committed murder a lot of the time. The victim, the deceased, the family, what can be done maybe then to balance that? I know that the law is making very fervent efforts to look more into victim impact assessment, community impact assessment, and so forth. Does the bill also go a little bit further into bringing the victim and the now deceased family closer, so that they can also find some closure, if I can call it closure?
Not necessarily. Remember, when someone commits a crime, it's a crime between themselves and the state. The victim side then may concentrate on the civil aspects of it, maybe suing that the murderer for loss of support, quantifying that this person was 35 years of age, and a 30-year-old wife, so all the calculations will have to be done in a civil court for some conversation. But usually when someone has been sentenced to death, then automatically, if you are a victim, you don't have anybody to sue. But what prison does now is prison tries to balance, to have counselors, people who can counsel the victims. If you watch TV, you can see some programs where inmates come out in the open, they try to apologize. The officers from prison, from our ministry, go to the families to try and apologize as well, to try and educate them, teach forgiveness, and so forth. So, but a lot can be done. I really appreciate it.
Indeed, a lot can be done. The numbers to get in touch with us are 0719 100 404. We are also live on Facebook, and this is quite a sensitive one, but this is what is being discussed currently in Parliament. There is a bill that requires your input, or at least if you know which way the wind is blowing, and even what we're doing as a country in terms of also coming forward. I often come across this question, Ms. Nyemba, and it's always hard to deal with, because people say, why then did we include the death penalty in the 2013 Constitution to begin with? It should have not been there. And now, fast forward, we're in 2024, we're a bit late to the party.
I cannot say we are late to the party. We are a people. We decide for ourselves. For that clause to be in the constitution, there were consultations throughout the country. So this is what the people wanted. And remember, we are a democratic country, and the way the constitution was done, it was through consultation so that everyone is heard. So at that time, the views should be in the abolished. That's why you find it in there. But otherwise, as time goes, and remember, we were very polarized. People had strong views on anything, and leadership had to agree to what the people wanted. So now, as we go on and on, I think you have heard about the president's experience when he was supposed to face the hangman.
Yes, Trabablas.
Yes, when he was a young man, and he was saved by somebody. And so from that, he has tested the closeness, the shadow of death. You know, and for that reason, I don't know what he felt when he was told he was going to die. And for that reason, he is also not for it. You know, the reason why, maybe from 2005, nobody signed for people, nobody executed all those signatures were put. But our current president has not put a signature to anybody to die.
And when it comes to commuting some of these sentences, is it an automatic thing that will happen upon the passing of the bill, that those who had previously been on death row, if I can put it that way? Yes.
No, those who were previously on the death roll, according to the bill, will have to appear again in the High Court for resentencing. If they are not even happy with the sentencing, they can appeal to the Supreme Court. They will not be sentenced to death. They will be sentenced to something. Maybe life imprisonment, maybe 20 years, maybe 5 years, depending on the time they will have served and other circumstances that will be looked at.
So it's even a way to review some of these cases.
It's even a way to review some of these cases.
Okay. And when you're looking at it from the accused point of view, I think that could also be something very positive. I think a second look at the case, and very important detail coming out there. Now, as we delve a little bit deeper into the bill, could you share a few more details or key highlights of what the current bill is proposing? I think we've already covered the aspects of the alternative punishment when it starts to act, as well as the resentencing aspects that you just mentioned now.
Okay, there's not much. The bill is not very, it's not big, because what it seeks to do is to delete everywhere where we say death penalty in the Genocide Act, in the Criminal Code, and in the everywhere where it speaks about death sentence. It's just amending, and then it then gives us a procedure of how we will have to go around with those who have already been sentenced. But the first thing that it says no court shall sentence. So it means from the date of the bill, after it has gone through Parliament and it becomes an act, from that date, no court shall sentence anybody to a death sentence. Then thereafter, everyone who had been convicted, sentenced to death, will have to go to the High Court for resentencing. They will also have an opportunity to appeal. You know, we normally say the law does not apply retrospectively, it becomes an act of Parliament.
A second and third bite of the cherry there. Attention to some of the messages that our listeners are sending in. I am speaking to PS Nyemba in the studio. All right, this one is coming from Majimba Kuba in Greendale, who says, good evening, Amajera. He says, good evening, Chera and Pemsek. Death penalty should stay forever for those vanenge vaurayawo vamwe. Imagine that Chivu says, imagine that Chivu case where there was deliberate killing. A mother killed 4 of her kids to fix her husband and didn't show any remorse in court. Because Waunenge Wauraya had a life and a right to live too. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's an emotional response, and it's allowed. That's basically how people feel, and that's how other people feel. And even most of us, that's how we felt in the beginning. But when as you go and you learn and you find out how other countries are doing it, you begin to see that, oh no, we could be in the wrong. I remember last year when I went to Tanzania for African Human Rights Conference, I was surprised that we were almost the only country that's left. We used to do with
Really?
Tanzania,
In Africa?
but Tanzania had already started to take steps towards that. So this is really a human rights issue. It has to be addressed. People have to understand it. And remember, the death penalty also was like a colonial principle. Remember how Banambuyane and all were hanged, and everyone, they were hanged. It was a colonial way of
punishment,
of
lynching.
punishment, exactly.
Yeah.
And then because we were colonized by the British, we all took that up ourselves. Zambia, Malawi, South Africa, all the countries that were colonized by the British, we hang, we hang people as a sign of yeah, but we are no longer colonized.
So we can think for ourselves
We
and
can
come
think
up
for
with
ourselves, and even when we are emotional about things, we've always had a way of dealing with our things. Even in our culture, remember, they were never saying you should kill somebody because they have killed. It has said there was never anything like you kill because you be killed because you killed.
I like how you take it back even to our own, African ways of dealing with these issues also. Another message comes in from Patrick, who says the death penalty is very necessary. I feel it should be administered to murderers and corrupt people. Look at China. Due to the death penalty that they impose on corrupt individuals, the corruption levels are low. Then for murderers, how would you feel kuziva kuti munhu akauraya your loved one anotochengetwa achipiwa chikafu and accommodation nestate? Munhu akauraya ngaurayiwewo. If we talk of human rights, the murderers should also respect people's lives. I'm sure you've heard of the case of Jantali. Such kind of people should never have a place on earth. Unfiltered, verbatim, this is another listener.
Yeah, we respect their views. Of course, those that are saying the death penalty must be abolished have no business to be sending communication now, because this bill is favorable to them. I expect more of those. And what I think is, it's just very emotional, like I said, especially for people who have lost their loved ones. It's so, but we should address the soreness. We should find means of addressing the wounds. When they have been addressed, then we can talk about the next stage.
Indeed, indeed. And then, all right, let's see, quite a lot more of the same sentiments are coming across. Okay. Comrade Mazivisa here is saying that it's positive that we do away with it, since the rest of the world has also done away with it. So that seems to be somebody agreeing with you there. Yes, then this one is talking about, okay, they say, Gilbert Biriadi says, same sentiments, and what's the difference between hanging and war?
Hanging and war, the two are different. If there is a war, someone can just come here and bomb us. But hanging, you have to commit a crime, then you are hanged.
You're punished. It doesn't just visit you.
No, it just doesn't come. It just doesn't come. It's a form of a punishment. But we are saying, okay, we understand that's a form of a punishment, but it's for Christians, it could also be quite sinful you know. People with that background, it can be it can be very wrong, and also very sinful
to also commit the same.
Yes, and I think when people were talking about the young men not being found, it's because of the nature of killing.
And who we are as a people, definitely.
Yes, exactly.
I do follow there. Zanden Fakose says, good evening, ladies. I'm in support of abolition. Nowadays, judges are a bit too quick to convict. Beyond reasonable doubt aspects are no longer taken seriously. I think we have more innocent people in jail than those who are guilty. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on that aspect, but I think just the fact that it's reversible. And I think it's something that you had mentioned. Okay, another issue comes up here where it says, are we not at risk of, since we are going with what the rest of the world is doing, the rest of the world, alphabet communities and so on. Saka tinoita cut and paste to what extent? How can we retain our own identity and not be flooded by some of these other laws that may go against our morals as African people, as Zimbabwean people?
I think I had said earlier on that this issue of death sentence is colonial. We were taught about this by the colonialists. We had our own means of resolving our issues, our murder cases. We would pay cattle to the family of the victim, whatever number they wanted. So we never had this death sentence. We are not actually trying to go by the standards of the world. We are simply going by our standards, our norms, our Ubuntu, how we used to do things. So I think we are okay. We are good to go.
I like the confidence there. If you're just joining us, we are in a conversation unpacking the bill that is abolishing the death penalty. And we are here with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. We're also on Facebook, and we invite you to share your thoughts on what is a very sensitive subject, but a very relevant one that we need to be on the same page on. Now, for those who might not know what happens next, perhaps PS Nyemba, you can just take us through the next steps now with the bill. What is to follow, and how can members of the public get involved or have their views heard as well?
Remember, the bill was brought in by a concerned citizen, but fortunately, Ministry had already started consulting. And Ministry had already put in guidelines on the death penalty. Consultations were done with the people. And now what's left is just Parliament to go through it. It has to go through the readings, and then it has to be adopted and become law. We can still receive suggestions or anything. Our offices are open, but the bill is already sailing in Parliament.
And if there's a member of the public listening and they feel, you know what, I would like to use that avenue to have my grievance, or maybe, you know, people like you were saying, the ones with wounds, who might feel like it's injustice that's being done by then allowing these the convicted persons to effectively go back to what they would deem is an easy life.
Okay, I think we can find platforms where we can accommodate them, because we understand very much that it's a big, giant step to take as a nation, as a country, as a ministry, and everyone else must be accommodated. We need to create space for people to even talk about it. Even when it is passed into law, we still want to engage people. We've got people in our ministry going out talking about this. We heard them, and even if that door may have been closed, they come to our ministry. Our Department of Policy is ready to talk to them, and I think to counsel them. I think we also need spiritual fathers
And mother.
and mothers, yes, the pastors, the reverends, the bishops to then continue to talk about this in their constituencies, in their churches, and everywhere.
Very, very important. The last question I'll take from our listeners, I think this is a very interesting question. It says, can the proposed bill, or rather, does the proposed bill stipulate compensation guidelines, like the number of cattle to be paid according to tradition, as the appeasement token? I don't know, PS. Is this practical?
Chira, this is, we are talking about the law now, and we are talking about criminal law. The other side of things has always been happening in the rural areas. I think that is the jurisdiction of the chiefs, that I can give to our very able chiefs, who are symbols of tradition and custodians of tradition. They can best help us.
Now we've fast run out of time, and we have to bring the conversation to a close. But as we come to the end, what would you like to say to the people of Zimbabwe listening on the next developments in our justice system following this very, very landmark position and petition to ultimately get rid of what is now an offensive law?
I want to say to the people of Zimbabwe, let's embrace the next step. Let's embrace the bill. Let's prepare ourselves to be forgivers so that we can also be forgiven. Let's embrace those that were given death sentences. When their sentences are commuted and they come back home, let's learn to embrace them. If God, our Creator, can forgive, who are we not to forgive? Of course, this bill is coming in after a lot of thought, and this bill is very much aligned to human rights, to the freedoms in the Constitution. We talk about the freedom of life. So we can't correct a wrong with a wrong. Let's accommodate each other. Things happen, mistakes happen, gruesome murders happen, but who are we to judge? So let's sit down, sit back, relax, clear our throats, and I think await this bill with smiles, although we are hating inside. Some people may be hating inside, but I know with time we will all appreciate it. It's very difficult to change. Every change is very difficult. The change from the death penalty to no death penalty in our system is not going to be an exception to the difficulty it is for a human being to move from point A to point B.
And on that note, I think that's a good place for us to bring our conversation to a close. And you know, I really had never thought about it like that, but I know that a lot of the afflicted and affected will take that on board, PS Nyemba, and open up and receive this bill for what it is. And as you say, chitima chakutofamba. So it's either you're on board or or otherwise. Thank you so much for coming in and dissecting such a sensitive topic for us. We look forward to engaging more with you around more issues of justice and legal affairs in Zimbabwe. We were speaking this evening to our guest, Permanent Secretary Ms. Vimbai Nyemba in the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, unlocking the death penalty bill, the bill that is to abolish the death penalty, and of course all the ancillary issues around this very important topic. Thank you so much for coming, and we thank you for your time and your insights.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you so much.